So thank you very much. I think we're going to skip straight to the panel discussion just because we're running a little bit behind on time. But do everyone keep your questions coming for our panelists. So this panel discussion today, we're going to focus on how stakeholders can work together to solve this issue of dual quality of food. And with us for this panel, I would like to firstly welcome back Francisco, who was with us earlier and who I introduced earlier. I'd also like to welcome to the panel Marco Mongillo. I probably pronounced that terribly, sorry, from the Italian confectionery company Ferrero. And lastly, but not least, Alessandro Mostaccio, who is a lawyer specialized in consumer affairs and also Secretary General of the Consumer Association Movimento Consumatori. Terrible pronunciation today. Okay, I'm British. Sorry. So the idea here is, as I said, to bring together all different viewpoints and perspectives to come together to figure out how to tackle this issue. So I'll firstly turn to each speaker in turn for some opening remarks. And I think, Francisco, I will start with you. So let me turn to you first. I mean, we've heard practical examples on how to tackle dual food quality today. Maybe you can expand on how policymakers and the European Parliament can further support these efforts. So I'll give you 5 minutes. The floor is yours for your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Well, the presentations were very technical and some of them really clear. I think the main message should be that we should have the science as the basis of our policy making, and also that we should include all stakeholders in this discussion. So companies, consumer organizations, EU institutions, NGOs, citizens, so we can have a fairly good solution in the end of this process. It was also said by the specialists, the law specialist, that this is obviously a complex issue in terms of definitions, in terms of member states, in terms of several legislation, not only at EU level, but also at member states. But I do think that this is a fairly important issue that should be tackled in the upcoming years. I continue to say that I do feel that for the majority of the members of the European Parliament, this is a secondary issue, not because it's not important, but because it's not being discussed as much as it should be. So I would say that the Commission has the role to start the process to understand how could we, through science and through the studies that are already being made, should initialize this process of harmonizing the legislation. And afterwards, the committees, through their representations, should improve the text, the amendments, the legislative papers that would be on the table, so the process could go as smooth as possible. We tend to see that the Parliament has a more progressive approach on these issues, and the Commission tries to make like the neutral pendants, so between the Parliament and the Council, and that the member states have more difficulties in trying to be more progressive on this approach. That's why we do feel that a science-based approach is the best way for us to tackle this issue. Although in several other files that we see, for example, in fisheries and agriculture, science sometimes is eroded by some blocks of interests, mainly connected with big financial interests. But let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that the science-based and legal approach is the best way for us to tackle this issue. And so I would say that we should include all the stakeholders in trying to assess what the next, afterwards, the Commission starts this process, include all the stakeholders, so we can have the best approach possible through all the EU institutions.
Excellent, thank you. And so turning now to Marco. Marco, perhaps you could bring the perspective from Ferrero. What is your experience with dual food quality? You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. So Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natasha. Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Well, our experience as Ferrero, as you can imagine, we are producers of very iconic brands. So we have been targeted many times on the issue of dual quality, but I must say that we had very positive experiences. And this is mostly also due to the fact that we could collaborate, for example, in providing our point of view in occasion of all the testing activities that were carried out by stakeholders, and especially with the GRC, the possibility to reply to their activities and to be part and to collaborate with them in order to have a clear view of what was happening in the European market. This was a very great opportunity, and also the possibility to rely on a common methodology. This is also very important, I think, from in general, from a company perspective, and for Ferrero, of course, in particular. So I must say that yeah, our experience was very positive. As Ferrero, we would never discriminate any consumers in general, and especially we would never discriminate between Eastern or Western consumers, of course. Our aim is always to give the opportunity to have the best taste experience all over Europe. So I mean, our products are the same all over Europe. So I mean, I can imagine that there are many sensitive aspects around this issue, and we are very welcome to collaborate on this. And also with the Eco project, I see that many of Ferrero products were already tested, and we are more than welcome to collaborate on this.
Excellent, thank you very much. And lastly, but not least, let me turn now to Alessandro for your opening remarks. So Alessandro, in your opinion, what do consumers expect when buying products in Europe? Are consumers' organizations sufficiently equipped to tackle the issue of dual food quality, in your opinion? So Alessandro, let me come to you now.
Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I just would like to thank you, because this invitation was the pretext to get to know your work and more generally this important issue. The premise is, I think that the same word quality is misleading about this issue, because the concept of quality is always multifactorial. And if we think about it, this problem concerns much more than quality, the expectation of consumer of buy identical products in terms of composition and in terms of taste, in terms of fragrance. This has nothing to do with quality of a product, but with expectation. And I think, to answer the question, that today European consumers expect a lot of loyalty. They expect full transparency, while it maybe have been different in the past. Today, they expect the product of a brand to be identical. Maybe from an industrial point of view, I'm talking nonsense, but in my opinion, in 2021, the existence of differentiated production lines for identical products, depending on the country target market, is not longer justified. We need more information Also economic information. I would like to know how much this market is worth in the UE and how many products, for example, Ferrero is selling with double quality in Europe. I think a lot. I think a lot. But was normal in the past. But nowadays probably is an anachronistic industrial practice. Because if we think about the importance of the single market, is quite a blasphemy against the European single market if it is carried out by European companies. In a globalized world, and I finish, individual brands, at least the most famous ones, are known. An heritage, a worldwide heritage. Consumers have the right to choose or not to choose a product, knowing what they are buying. So the time, I think, should be up for this practice that has a lot of historical motivation, but is not justified anymore, at least in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Then let's now move to our panel discussion, and let me remind everyone to keep your questions coming in for the Q&A session afterwards. So let me turn to Francisco first. I mean, so what synergies and kind of collaboration possibilities do you see among the different actors and stakeholders? You know, we're talking here policy, consumers, and industry on this issue of dual food quality.
Well, as other EU process making some legislation, we have at the European Parliament, we have several in the committees, we have several auditions, we have the request from the presidents of the committees to make studies, to make transversal analysis of the topic. We have coordination between the committees, we have civil society. So I do think that this process should continue, and all the stakeholders should have their voice on the process. But I would keep in mind that we should stick to a science-based approach, because this way we will be more protected from our own biases and our institution and organization biases, and therefore we should have this science-based approach, so we can have a plain neutral level field when we are making our decisions. And so one side that I also think it's very relevant is the information to the civil society, so they can understand what's being discussed, what are the repercussions, the timeline, so they can expect some results in due time. What I noticed as a member of the European Parliament, unfortunately, is that the citizens still don't understand how EU institutions work. So obviously this is a problem also from me and from all the members of the European Parliament and EU institutions. So we should keep sharing information how EU institutions, committees, auditions, so on and so forth work, so they can be more integrative also of citizens and NGOs that represent them, or other institutions that represent them. And so the discussion doesn't be always in the side of those institutions that already know the mechanisms of EU institutions. So I think that's also a very important challenges for us to be more active on trying to also engage with the media, so they can share what's being made and what are the possibilities of citizens and institutions that represent them to participate in this debate.
Definitely. And maybe, Marco, I can come to you on this now, on the same question, you know, about these synergies and collaboration possibilities between the industry with other stakeholders. And also just to pick up on something, I mean, I think Francisco, he reserved some criticism for industry players earlier, saying, you know, they often put a lot of roadblocks. I mean, I'm wondering, you were quite optimistic in your opening remarks. You said, you feel that the industry is up to rising to the challenge. Have you seen a lot of positive change in this area? Are you open to kind of collaboration on this issue?
Of course. As I said, I completely agree with what has been said by Mr. Guerreiro, because, of course, the scientific approach in this kind of analysis must be really preserved and should be at the basis of any kind of testing or any kind of activities on dual quality. But this is why, as I said before, it's very important that JRC has established a common methodology that can be used all over Europe in order to test the products and to allow a stakeholder approach, to allow even a broader number of stakeholders to take part, to these activities. And I see also that the Eco project takes a lot from the methodology of the JRC. This is very, very important. It's very important because, as you can imagine, when companies like Ferrero are targeted with dual quality assumptions, for us, not only for Ferrero, but for many companies, it can be a very big reputational problem, of course. So, and on this, I also want to answer to Mr. Mostaccio, and I can reassure that in Europe, as I said before, we don't have any case of dual quality. I can reassure you. So, and of course, we have the tasting activities of the JRC that are public, as Mr. Ulberth said before. We have these activities that is being carried on by the Eco project, and also these results are very. You can access the website right now, and you can see the results. So collaboration is fundamental. Of course, we welcome any multiple stakeholder approach on this. It is very important to preserve to understand that with these allegations that are there are also some very possible problems for a company from a reputational point of view, of course. But we also see that we have a legal framework now that is in Europe that many countries are already using. So it's important to have this multi-stakeholder approach, and again, the scientific approach is at the basis of any kind of activities that are carried out on this topic.
So it actually made a note of Alessandro's question. I was going to ask you about it, but you already jumped the gun, which is you're ahead of the game there.
I'm sorry, but we don't have any case of dual quality.
Okay. Well, maybe Alessandro, I'm wondering, he's answered directly your question there. Is that a satisfactory answer for you? Are you interested to hear more? Maybe I can hear your reaction to that response.
No, thank you for the answer, and the good answer in this case. But I think that nowadays the way this case by case approach is the reality. For this reason, we have to collaborate, because now probably it's late to come back and to think about a blanket ban by means of regulatory intervention in the best way of clarifying the situation. Now we have chosen the case-by-case approach, and can be also a good solution if at the same time we first straighten the rule of consumer association, and we help them, we keep them. For us is a new frontier, is a new border, the protection on this issue. We are not prepared at all, just to say the truth. We need to be equipped, but at the same time, we have enhanced the possibility for qualified entities to launch representative action on behalf of consumer. And just in December, with the new collective action approved by the European Parliament, we have an important tool for this. And fourthly, we have introduced stronger sanction powers from member states' consumer authorities. This is also happening. It's happening with the directive 2019-2161. So three out of 4 of this point are about to be implemented. So everything seems to go in the right direction. And seems we don't need really a new law that blanket ban this practice. But we need the collaboration of all the stakeholders. I think that all the European consumer associations are at your disposal. We need only one European database that we can use, where we can put our alert. And we need also, thanks to the single methodology, that this methodology is at our disposal. And we need also to receive some economic resource to pay the test. So it should be very careful test, because it's really delicate, really this subject. So I think we can do our job if I saw that is a new frontier. We are helped, we are engaged in this big goal. We are, but we need help to improve our organization.
Yeah, you put forward some really kind of concrete examples there of ways that you could move forward on this. Maybe Francisco, I could get your reaction on kind of some of these suggestions put forward by Alessandro. Do you think these are kind of feasible? I mean, he spoke also about the need for stronger sanctions, but as we've spoken about, it's not coordinated well at the EU level. Maybe I can hear your reaction on these concrete proposals put forward by Alessandro.
Yes, as we all know, the European Union is very bureaucratic and sometimes lacks the speed to tackle these infractions, and so obviously we should have a more quick procedure to understand where member states are lacking to comply with the legislation, and then to have this approach, legal approach. I do feel that obviously if we are not in a federation or some type of federation, it's more difficult because we have several procedures, and so this tends to be very bureaucratic. But I would be in favor, obviously, of a regulatory system that would be more efficient in the end. So obviously we have steps before reaching the sanctions, but to be more efficient and more quick tackling these issues. But again, we have several institutions, and so the process can be quite long. But I will also obviously be in favor of these suggestions to be quicker and more efficient tackling these problems if they emerge. And obviously this has also a very interesting discussion that can be related to the own resources that we are now moving forward in the EU budgets, that this can also be a very effective tool of using this finance that can be tackled through this coins for this. I'm lacking the name, but that can be also a very important tool to have own resources and then invest where it should be invested through more information, to more clear guidance. And so this has several aspects, not only at the consumer side, but also at the budgetary perspective.
And I wanted to pick up now on something we were talking about, something you mentioned actually earlier, Francisco. You know, this idea that the basis of these food products shouldn't be taste, it should be health, and it should be science-based, and something that you really stressed. But we also saw throughout the presentations that clearly price and taste, maybe they're not necessarily always correlated with health, but price and taste are very, very important to consumers. Now that seems to be a very, very difficult circle to square for the industry. So Marco, I thought I would come to you on this one, on how, you know, how we can square that circle and how we can kind of encourage. I mean, at the same time, you've got pressure from your consumers saying, no, I want this, and you've got pressure from the other side saying, no, we should, you know, kind of, we should change things to be more healthy, etc. So maybe you can come in on that kind of dilemma, maybe, that I see there.
Well, it's a very difficult question, of course, because the consumer is always at the center of every company. You know, is the central, the most important stakeholder or shareholder also of the company. So it's quite difficult to make everyone happy, especially when you have such iconic brands. You know, so what we try to do is to give to consumers the best consumer experience in terms of taste and in terms of quality, of course. And this is why we want to reassure again that we always give the same taste experience also to consumers, but also from the presentation that we had before from the GRC, from Mr. Ulrich, we could see that the taste experience phases of any methodology is the most difficult one. You have to imagine that, for example, when you test products, you can have from different markets, you can have, for example, different timing of the shelf life when the product is tasted. And this can impact the consumer experience, of course. You can have differences in the storage condition of the products. And for example, for chilled products, this can impact a lot the consumer experience. So when it comes to analyze labeling, it's very easy to understand when the two products are identical and when there are differences within the list of ingredients. But when it comes to quality is very subjective. You know, it's very impossible to define what is quality. There is not a better or lower quality. Sometimes there are just differences in recipes due to different kind of justification that can be valid or can be not valid. I'm not entering into this, but it's just that you can have so many things that can really make the product different from a experience point of view. So of course, for a company, we want to make every consumer happy, but sometimes it's difficult, of course. And this is why I think many times you can have some products in some countries, some other products in other countries, or sometimes companies can adapt some recipes to make it healthier, if you want to say like this, or just go into the direction of a different different consumer perception or consumer needs at a local level. And this is very true, because this is also part, you know, of the justification that were included in the directive that is now being transposed at the local level. So also to come back to what Mr. Guerreiro said, it's going to be very difficult to have this methodology applied at a European level, because there are many constraints. It's not only a bureaucratic problem, but it's very difficult to have, you know, a methodology that can be applied all over Europe. This is why the authorities and all the organizations that are involved in these activities must collaborate on this.